just popped in to say hello. We just popped in to hear the show, the show, the show. You'll hear the show and then you'll go. There's more to know, so take it slow. The show, the show, the show.
Hi, my name is
Emma.
Tom.
Sarah.
Finn.
Michelle. Susie. That's S for Susie.
K for Kieran.
My name is Pete, and welcome to Tales TV.
Hey, it's me lying down. You gotta get up to get down. So let's do it. 10 tens.
Let's start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop.
I love the world. What a world. Stay safe, world. Hello, everyone. It's me, Red Blur, here introducing the first episode of Blurrisode of Tales TV. So first, let's see a blur being drawn. Then let's go to a Zoom phone call with lots of blurs all around the world. Then let's do some other things, some singing, some jumping, some tens, and see some lying down. What do you think? Take it away, Yellow Blur.
It's me lying down. Just here sitting watching Tales TV. It's brilliant. And the next thing up is some signing. So it's time to sign.
This is the colours of the rainbow. So this is sign for red from the mouth. This is side of like a rainbow, sort like a sun, like this. Very good. And then pink is at the side of your nose like this. Then it's green like grass. Then it's orange like the sign of orange. Then it's purple, which is sparkly P like this. And this is blue. It's like the blue of your veins. So that's the colours of the rainbow.
Blue. What colour strawberries are raspberries?
Well, Lyra, there.
No, it's red. Blue, what colour my top?
Well, Lyra, your top is red.
No, it's yellow. What colour is ball?
Well, it's the colour black.
Blue is pink. Blue, what colour is the grass?
Well, Lyra, the colour is black.
No, it's green. No, what colour is carrot?
Well, that's a difficult one. It's black.
It's orange. Blue, what colour my bike?
Well, Lyra, it's black.
No, it's purple. Blue, what colour are you?
Well, Lyra, I'm black.
You're blue.
Lyra, where's the cakes? I want cake, man.
Next up, it's mime in the old times, and that means the screen goes black and white. Let's see what happens.
Be right back, everyone. Just going out for a few hours. I'll be back when I want. Bye.
Blurgh, stop. You need to stay at home.
Outside, outside, outside. It's a house. It's a house. Inside, inside, inside. It's a home. It's a home.
Blah!
Hey, hey, hey! It's me lying down. Loving Tales TV. I read the comments and the email saying, hey, where's lying down? And I thought, hey, where is lying down? And then I thought, hey, I am lying down. So I'm here, I'm gonna do my moves with you, and then we can all do it together. So let's do it. Hit the track.
Hey, here we go. 1, 2. I like to get down and groovy with my banana smoothie. I like to pull lots of shapes with all the chimps and all of the apes. So here we go, because we're running, running, running. We're roaring, roaring, roaring. We're dancing, dancing, dancing. Am I standing up or lying down? You know the answer to that one. I'm lying down. Yeah, baby. Here we go. Oh, let me take you on a jungle ride. Oh, when we roar with pride. This beat is easy for us. to the morning chorus. Because we're running, running, running. We're roaring, roaring, roaring. We're dancing, dancing, dancing. Am I standing up or lying down? You know the answer to that one. I'm lying down. I said you gotta get up to get down. You gotta get up to get down. Come on, I said you gotta get up to get down. 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 Move your hands and move your feet. Follow me with the jungle beat. I said move your hands and stamp your feet. Follow me with the jungle beat. I said clap your hands and stamp your feet. Follow me with the jungle beat. I said clap your hands, stamp your feet. Follow me with the jungle beat. Running, running, running. We're rolling, rolling, roaring. We're dancing, dancing, dancing. Am I standing up or lying down? You know the answer to that one. I'm lying down. Come on, one more chorus. Here we go. I said running, running, running. I'm rolling, rolling, roaring. I'm dancing, dancing, dancing. Am I standing up or lying down? You know who am I? That one. Hey, I'm lying down. Hey, hey.
Tales Day is closing. We hope you've had some fun. We will miss you, each and every one. So long, everybody. We say it with a sigh. See you later, everybody. For now, it's Tails goodbye. See you later, everybody. For now, it's Tails goodbye.